Hi, and welcome back to the European VC, the go-to podcast for everything European VC. If you love the show, share it with your friends and join our newsletter at eu.vc. Today, we're happy to welcome Luca, managing partner and co-founder of Una Terra, a €200 million venture capital fund to accelerate European scale-ups, fostering solutions to climate change, biodiversity loss, and targeting the removal of 2 gigatons of CO2 and 1 million tons of plastic waste per year from the environment by 2030. If you enjoy our content, do support us by hitting the follow button, giving us a review, and following the European VC on LinkedIn.
Welcome to the European VC podcast. Back in 2022 and early 2022, together with Uplink, a project by the World Economic Forum, we launched a challenge for innovative investment funds with a focus across at least one of 8 key SDG areas: nature, ocean, plastics, climate action, circular economy, water, health, and education. This campaign, a partnership between Uplink, EUVC, Isomer Capital, and other great names, aimed to source and select innovative funds investing in purpose-driven startups around the world. Now, the European VC has always and will always be European focused, but saving our planet is too much of an important topic for us to just stand idle. So today, we're proud to present one of the 17 funds selected that is mobilizing capital for people and the planet. We are welcoming Luca from Una Terra. Luca, why do you think Una Terra was nominated as one of the innovative funds for our future by Uplink?
Thank you for having us here today, David. Very excited. Why we were one of the innovative funds for our future? We believe that is because, A, we are not only just one of these Article 9 funds, but we are focused on having a significant impact, and we track that impact at the company level and at the fund level with specific KPIs, in particular CO2 emissions and plastic waste that has been removed. And that makes it very tangible, both for our investors and for the company we work with. And second, we are so convinced of what we're doing that we put at stake our own carry on the achievement of those KPIs. So not only the financial KPIs have to be at par or even better than what you would expect in VC, but also the environmental one. And the final part is that we have a really good balance between a team that is the traditional investing team from, let me say, a financial background that you would expect. But we also have a good portion of our team that, as you would find in private equity, has very much an operating background. So we can really help companies growing faster with commercial introductions, with market entry, with partnership that we can develop with them, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the reasons why we got selected, or at least that's the feedback I got from the team.
I think you raised some cool things, and I was taking here some notes, and I can see Andreas is going over my notes and kind of agreeingly. So, 2 things I took note here is obviously metrics, right? So it's impact, but how do you measure that? But kind of an outcome of that I find super interesting is that the carry is on the line, right? And in full disclosure, I clearly remember a conversation we had with an emerging GP last year that was thinking about doing this and going through this whole process of how do I set this up? I'm tinkering with something, right? And I want to make sure I do it right. I don't want to create perverse incentives, and I want it to be somewhat market standard, whatever. So, Luca, it would be awesome to hear your reflections on that process inside of Una Terra, right? How did you come up with your model today? And no need to disclose all the details, but do disclose everything you feel comfortable with disclosing at this stage.
The way we came up with Una Terra is that we were doing investing before as partners in areas like, corporate venturing with large corporations and some VC as well. And when we got together, we said, first of all, how do we interview LPs, investors, and also companies we would invest in to learn from them what they would want to see in an impact fund? And that process, typical marketing process of understanding the needs of your customers, led us to create Una Terra. Specifically on the topic of reporting, I think as we know, there is plenty of, greenwashing. There is plenty of very high-level definition of, let's have some impact on sustainability, but with no real concrete agenda. So we wanted to be a lot more specific than that. We felt it was the only way to get credibility with real impact investors and with companies that really want to make a difference. And I have to say, we found pretty quickly alignment among our partners. And then, we got the help of a governance advisor to define how do you set up these metrics in a way that makes sense over time for not only us as partners, but also the employees of the fund and everybody else to be excited and challenged at the same time and make sure that we progress as a team together. Nothing else than asking, let me say, your customers and try to come up with a solution that is pragmatic.
I am struggling with whether we should dive further into this topic now or or just take a step back and ask you, Luca, how you came in. And I think I'll actually let our audience know that Andreas just made a decision. We are going to turn back and just say who the hell is Luca and the firm and so on, and then we'll come back to the topics of metrics and carry, because I think that those topics, both of them, really deserve a deep dive conversation where we, metrics being one of them, right? Where, there's so many implications both on the the VC, but also on the founders that you're investing in. And then as a consequence of you investing, they have to be able to live up to that. And then your growth stage investor. So there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be somewhat put in place beforehand when you come in. So I think that there's so much to unpack there. But I just want to make sure that we have all our audience understanding who you are, because I think that there's a very worthwhile story there. So Luca, with that said, let's ask you the question: who is Luca, and why did you choose to dedicate your life to Una Terra and the climate and impact investing side of things?
I will say, first of all, I'm a father of two boys, and every change that I made in my career actually came with a change in my family. And every time I got more and more involved because of that, with the purpose that I identified probably about 15 years ago in my career, which is sustainability and impact, right? So my background, I'm an engineer. I have an MBA from the Wharton School, so balance between finance, if you want, and more business. I spent a long time in very large corporations, always high technology, B2B, like Hewlett-Packard, Honeywell, Amcor. I also been the CEO of two private equity-backed companies. I've been at Bain in consulting for a number of years. But let me say, since I moved back from the US to Europe, which was 2010, I decided that every single company I was going to work for would have to have a significant impact on our world in terms of environment, social, etc. What we now maybe call ESG or impact, and at the time was maybe more CSR only. But I worked first in emission reduction for cars. Then I joined, after a number of years, packaging, which also was going through a lot of turbulence related to sustainability. And I also started getting board positions in the same space. And ultimately, I decided that my time was limiting the impact I could have. And so only by setting up an organization like Una Terra with a fund, with a team of people, and with the opportunity to leverage and support the work of a number of founders, we could have a significant impact in innovation. And beyond that, I'm also advising large funds in private equity like Advent, Triton, KKR, etc., to impact their current portfolio in ESG rather than just wait for future innovation. So that's my life, and I will continue to do that until I can, let's say.
And just before we started recording here, we had a small conversation that I said, let's save that for the interview.
Yes.
And that was the reflection on your part between dedicating your time to innovation versus helping make a change in how we do business today in the existing companies. I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
Both are important. That's why I try to find time for both. In reality, I think innovation is key because it will allow us to transform entirely industries that today are not sustainable. They are based on fossil fuels or whatever else we have created. But in the meantime, we can't wait only for future innovation that will take some time to implement. And as a result, I want to work also on existing businesses that are already large enough. And so just by sheer scale, they can have a real impact. Very likely not complete to some extent as when you will have new solutions, but at least, and a good point is you can do it right now. So I've always been very pragmatic in my career. I never said, oh, let's wait, for the future solution. Even when I was in automotive, right, everyone was already talking about fuel cell and electric, but we wanted to find solution for the existing engines, and that's where I was working. So it's a bit similar in this sense today. we need to work both on the existing and on the future.
Could you tell us a bit both the founding story there, and it's not just you; it's €100 million fund, so there's a whole group behind it. So could you tell us, a bit about the makeup there, and also we always start with the name, saying Una Terra. Okay, here it's quite self-explanatory, but feel free to tell us what that means.
I would say the funny thing is that I'm Italian, but I'm not the one who picked up the name. It's actually our Dutch partner that came up with the idea, and we actually took us through, he has a sort of process to go through, and we fell in love with this name because it's about having only one planet Earth and not thinking that we can go to Mars or do something else, but we need to protect and regenerate what we have. So that's Una Terra, and we hoped that even if it's Italian and maybe Spanish, many people would understand it anyway. That's the story of the name. The founding partners are really friends, people that I respect professionally. I worked with them a number of years before. Costas is a person that has set up his own company advising very large corporations, mostly in fast-moving consumer goods and retail, through 3 offices in New York, London, and Amsterdam. Sold that company to Accenture 3 years ago and decided to join us and dedicate his future to continue the work of understanding how to bring innovation and scale it up quickly commercially, but also as an investor. Chiara, who is the other founding partner, she has also a, fast-moving consumer good career. To some extent, ashamed for her experience through Philip Morris, through General Mills, through a lot of these monsters, has decided to spend more time on the sustainable side of things. And actually, to be honest, even already in those large corporations try to make a shift. But we met at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We spent a significant time there, specifically on the new plastic economy. So the whole area related to circular economy, which has become then the focus for us of this fund. We do believe the circular economy has a significant impact on climate change on one side, estimation say 40% of climate change, and on the other side also on really closing the loop on many industries that today are very linear, and so there is not a very good end of life other than seeing plastic in the ocean or landfill. And so those are the areas where we can work mostly on: packaging, waste management, apparel, agri-tech, sustainable food, and to some extent fintech. So we try to be focused on those areas. There are not many funds that are working on that. I don't know if it's because it's not such a clean and exciting space like others, but it's one where there is a significant focus from regulation, from the European Commission in particular, that is providing huge tailwinds for all the industry working there. And there is a lot more attention from consumers because it's physical, right? You see it. You see the waste, the trash that should not be around. And as a result, we can actually work together, both as businesses and as consumer and people, to develop a better world.
And then maybe just to tie this to the intro that David gave in the beginning. So you're part of the Uplink initiative. You were picked as one of the innovative funds for our future. Could you tell us a bit about what that's given you? Also, the whole WEF connection, also how you're involved in that network as well as others, because I think that's an interesting part and important part of the fund as well.
We were very proud to be selected. And, usually when we're part of an initiative, we're very serious about being really involved and not just, get the benefit. So I participated personally and some of my partners to pretty much every single opportunity that the World Economic Forum and Uplink has given us, from the Climate Week in New York, the Federal Reserve, visit of some of the partners like Salesforce, and as a result, I think we have gotten to become part of really the connection and the family. Davos at the beginning of the year, and Geneva, there have been a lot of meetings, and it's good to know also the other participants. And yes, I mentioned to you before, what is going to be our anchor investor is one of the most important things that a fund can get, actually is coming through this connection.
Right after a podcast.
Yes, and of course, your podcast is at the top of the agenda, because no, seriously, we were very happy to be part of it because we know the reach and the opportunities that brings as well. So one of the companies we invested in actually was a previous year top innovator from Uplink. So I think it's as much as John always says we're at the beginning is 2 years, but because of the leverage of the World Economic Forum and everything else, I think it's becoming a serious opportunity for both funds and companies to cooperate in a much more value-aligned and system-aligned space. And, we're going to Villar next week, actually, where there's going to be another opportunity to connect globally, not just in Europe, with all the funds and the companies that can have a say in this space.
And just information for our audience here, I think that it's not daily, but it's at least multiple times in a week. Someone raising a climate fund reaches out and says, do you know who I should talk to? And of course, we have a bunch of LPs that are looking into this space, but it's always then I don't do an intro until I've spent some time looking at the fund, and otherwise I'm very quickly just passing through emails, and that's not really value to anyone. But I always try and say that especially climate is so collaborative, and now with what Uplink is doing, it makes a lot of sense to orient yourself in that direction, because obviously the World Economic Forum is the place where many of the family offices and very wealthy corporates and pension funds and so on orient and meet. So I really think that especially in this space, there is a golden opportunity for fund managers to get involved and thus also be able to raise, because there's actually a place where people come together and say, I do want to invest in this space. So that's a shout out to the audience. Now, and I know David is dying to get into the carry question, I just want to ask you about the metrics side first, because I think there's a natural progression from saying, okay, obviously your carry is going to be tied up to something that is going to be the metrics. So let's talk about those metrics first and say the first thing that I think of when I see having strong metrics as something that you care about as a fund is, well, you also then care a lot about founders reporting on things. And obviously you're a late stage investor, and that means that it's kind of a necessary thing at that stage that you're quite well established already. But we have a lot of early stage VCs listening in, and there I'm seeing some funds now saying, but what we really do at the very early stage is help founders and startups get started on building those metric systems and get the right habits in order and the right systems in order from the get-go. So I'd love to ask you if you could speak to that part of our audience and say, what is it that you, as investor coming in at the growth stage, are looking for, and what would you wish that the early stage investors had either taken care of already or had primed the founders to think about? I'm curious to hear. And also whether that's even important, right? You might also say, no, Andres, that's not a problem at all.
First of all, yes, metrics are important because they focus the agenda, right? For, they always say what is gets measured, gets done. It's very true, particularly when you are a small company and you have so many priorities and you have to focus on some, right? So first of all, what we've done is really focus on very simple metrics. We didn't want to have like a long list, because long list also becomes as if you didn't have any, right? And so we just said, let's pick one for climate change, and that has to be CO2 emission equivalent, right? So the most important greenhouse gases, and everything else is converted to CO2 emission. And on the other side, for biodiversity loss, for ecosystem, we decided to use plastics weight, because it's something that is already measured to a large extent as the reference. Is only one of the many pollutants, unfortunately, that we create, but it's probably by far the largest in terms of quantity, and it keeps growing despite all the activities of trying to limit. So we decided to focus on that, also because of our background, and we know the entire value chain very well, right? So those two pillars are the one that we expect every company to measure. And to your point, right, if we see that already measured, great. If it's not measured, we will help the companies to start measuring it. It doesn't have to be done in a very fancy, sophisticated way with very complex tools, but has to be, precise enough that we can use it on a quarterly basis for our own reporting. So what we do, we make sure that in the first meeting we do with a company post-investment, we typically do a strategy meeting to align their aspiration, where to play, how to win, with our understanding as well of where they want to go. And we also define in which areas our own involvement can help them in terms of implementation of the strategy. Do we need to introduce them to some customers? Do we need to, help them entering a new market, etc.? And then also specifically on the sustainability side, how does sustainability integrates with their strategy, and how to create value through sustainability? Because very often sustainability is seen as a way to reduce risk, not as a way to really create value. And I think particularly in innovation, we need to think of businesses in a way that are actually leveraging their position to create value through sustainability. So in practice, very simple on the metric side, tracking of the metrics and estimating that the companies we invest in have the potential at least to get to the scale that we need to achieve. So our target is to be able to contribute 2 gigatons in terms of reduction of CO2 emission and 1 million tons of plastic waste over the life of our fund, which is a significant number, but I think is achievable if you think about the level of scale that the type of companies we look at can achieve.
One question before we go to the carry part. Is that also the metrics that you're then measuring yourself by, those two?
Yes, of course. So it would not make sense otherwise. I think is that we need to be able to focus on the same areas that we would want the companies we work with to focus on. So absolutely. So we just basically consolidate at the fund level, and we make sure that we have a range of achievement that we want to get to, and then we review it again at a quarterly level and more detail at a yearly level with the partners team and with the investors. So we share those numbers also with the LPs, obviously.
And so that means that if you don't reach the 2 gigaton mark, there's no carry for anyone. I'm kidding.
Yeah, that pretty much, is not too far from reality. So what we've done is, we have this discussion within the World Economic Forum. Of course, it's going to continue evolving because it's a very hot topic. We decided to do 50% of the carry in total. So 50% is connected to financial and 50% to this environmental. It's probably the highest number seen so far. At some point, we will get to 100% probably, but there is only one other fund that we know of that is called Ocean Blue or Blue Ocean in France that has put also 50% and also part of the innovative fund for our future. In reality, we believe that at some point businesses should exist only if they have a positive impact. So why should it be even 50? But let's say that we start and we go in that direction. And then, of course, what we've done is the typical range around the number, right, to allow for the imprecision of the process, because we can't know the future, the economy, how many businesses we're going to invest in, et cetera, et cetera. We have the best possible idea that we can think about now. So we want to invest only in a limited number, probably 20, 25. Each of them put a significant investment, around 10 million each, over 2 or 3 rounds. Why? Because we want to support these companies for a long period of time and make sure that we give them as much as possible before leaving them to maybe a better investor that can take them to a much higher scale. And in that period, we want to make sure that sustainability becomes part of the DNA of the company. And we speak a lot about environmental, but trust me, without having put numbers on it, we do care a lot also about diversity and inclusion, and specifically gender. Out of the 6 investments we've done so far, 4 have a CEO and a founder that is a woman. And we've not done that on purpose. We've done that by finding the best possible leaders, we believe. And as a result, I think in sustainability, there is a lot more leadership, at least from our perspective, from women. Our advisory board is majority women, and our Sustainability Impact Committee, which is a very important body to ensure that everything we do is by the book on sustainability. And it includes people from Cambridge Institute of Sustainable Leadership and from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Again, and there as well, 50-50 men and women. Similarly, in our team now, not the co-founders, but in the full team, we are 50-50. So we try to do that because we think it's important. It also cannot go into a team in a company and say, well, you should do this. And then your team is completely different, right? So,
it might sound as an unfair question, but I think it's a question that has to be asked, because I find it very hard to talk about impact and sustainability and governance without talking about greenwashing and how different organizations protect themselves, but also the teams for that and their stakeholders. So, and carry being, I think in venture, it's like the ultimate example, right? Because that's how everyone gets fat in the long term. So if I understood correctly, you took roughly half of your carry pool, assuming everything else is standard, right? I'm assuming that, but let's keep it simple. And you just said that, well, we're measuring, CO2 reduction or CO2 equivalent reduction, plastic reduction. We have some numbers here, we have some ranges, but there's this hard data that we know if we underdeliver by X, our carry underdelivers between brackets by Y, or completely gone, right? Depending on what that amount is. How do you make sure that you're not inflating the impact numbers? Because it's incredibly hard to get these numbers. And then the last thing you want as a GP is to kind of put that onus on the founders, right? That's the last thing you want to do. And then they're stuck in this clusterfuck of reporting just so you can get your carry, right?
That's exactly why there has to be a third party involvement, right? So that's why we had to create what we call not our name, actually, we asked them to select their own name. It is called Sustainability Impact Committee. And again, there are a number of, impressive people there. So there is the person that at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is in charge of all the initiatives, pretty much so from the new plastic economy to apparel to food, etc. And then a professor at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership that is also the person that coordinated the creation of a global standard for ISO for purpose-led organization. These people actually then on a regular basis can hire and rely on special technical consultant in sustainability that know how to do an LCA, know how to do a carbon assessment. We would not be the one doing it, and we cannot ask, to your point, to go at this level of detail to founders that have plenty of other things to do. But we need to make sure that it's part of their day-to-day, the fact that these numbers are important. Then the fact that someone else has to come in and measure it is a little bit like, someone coming and measuring, I don't know, the energy you're using in your plants. So it's the same thing, right? So you need to have someone that is a specialist and also is neutral, right? No one can be paid, for instance, through carry if in the end, they're the ones saying you're going to get your carry or not. So yes, we had to set up all these governance processes. And I can tell you, that's the reason why we spent so much time at the beginning on governance between Luxembourg and our holding company in Switzerland to ensure that all the checks and balances are done in a way that there is pretty much zero risk for and zero tolerance for greenwashing, which I think is one of the worst things that's happening to the industry right now, because it creates even less credibility on something that should be a place where we all collaborate and trust each other.
Maybe intellectual / philosophical follow-up question there. You said something interesting, which is you said we're at 50-50. One day we'll be at 100 in terms of financial performance, impact performance. So just to give some context to our listeners as well, I think the EUVC, Andreas and myself mostly had like two big kind of roles / priorities in engaging with Uplink in this project. And the first one was obviously helping get the word out there for the European GPs, because that's our bread and butter, right? But the second one was also, and this is behind the scenes, so that's why I'm saying it to our listeners as well, is like just being sure that we weren't kind of compromising impact versus financial performance, but also the other way around, so that we weren't using the term impact-driven fund to justify underperformance or worse results. So my intellectual / philosophical question to you is, well, do you actually believe that going 100% impact performance-driven carry is the way to go? I feel almost compelled to say, well, isn't 50-50 the ideal already? I don't know. What do you
Actually,
think?
look, yes. I mean, if you ask me like that, I think, 50-50 is also what would not scare in this initial phase. Like you also have to attract the best possible talent. You may need to make sure you get people who are super commitment of impact, but also super committed of being outperforming on the financial side, because the worst thing we can do is to say impact equals, no money, but then, that becomes philanthropy or something else. So the whole point is that I truly believe, because of my experience in various companies, etc., that sustainability can generate an immense amount of profit if done well, and is also the way that I position that in much bigger private equity funds than the one that we have here. So it's all about value creation. It's not about, fair trade and child labor. Those are all great things that need to happen, but they cannot live very long if there is not someone else that is financing the impact. And as a result, we need to have a big part of the plan generating value. So for me, like the 50-50 was a very, very good balance between making sure that we are clear that this has to be top decile return venture capital, and also because we have one more lever than others, which is we are in the midst of the biggest transition, economic, social transition that any of us will ever see. And I truly believe that all the unicorns that will come out, like our friends at BlackRock are saying, will come out from the transition from an ESG perspective, even if we probably don't agree with the way they do it. But
I was about to say, so I'm from socialist Denmark. I don't think I've ever in my life heard our friends at BlackRock.
No, I believe, like there is a lot of, to be honest, a lot of greenwashing that they're doing as well, and a lot of just checking the box kind of stuff, even if the rhetoric is very good and the communication is very good. I hope that we have good communication, but a lot better content, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But Luca, you said something just before, and it's the final question I'll ask before the quick fire. And it might be opening up a conversation that we can continue in Villar over a couple of years. I tend to think that there are two types of people dedicating their life to climate and sustainability. There's one camp that's the optimists and are coming from a position that basically think that the world we will survive, and if we were not looking at a doomsday prophecy. And then there's the others that are more skeptic and saying, okay, we're going to take a stab at it, but I am not very happy about the outlooks of our planet. I'm curious to ask you, where are you on this scale?
I have to say, first of all, I'm usually an optimistic by background, which helps me going through the craziness of fundraising in VC. But I also have to say that, we have a lot of signals that tells us that the world, the physical world, the environment is moving a lot faster than we thought. So we don't even know if 1.5 degrees or whatever is enough. The honest answer is that it doesn't change a bit what I'm doing every day, because whichever way, I will do everything I can. You say, starting from the small, my family, all the next generation, all the people who live on the earth, all the animals and plants that I love so much. And I, since I was a kid, I was very happy to travel around the world and see how wonderful it is. So in reality, we have no other option, right? We still have to do it. We don't have the luxury of some people who think that we can travel to Mars and create another planet. That's not an option. So here is the option is to actually find more people that want to help and collaborate with us. And that's where, in the end, it's up to us to find ways to enjoy also the process as we go through.
And then you're living in Switzerland, so I guess you're well positioned in the sense that climate change will make skiing worse, as we just spoke about before, but hopefully not too much else.
No, we're super lucky, right? Because we're in the middle of mountains and lakes, and oh my God, if the high water comes here, we're very deep everywhere.
Yeah, you're pretty solid. Yeah, and mass migration is also, it's a bit tough with all the mountains and stuff. So you can probably protect yourself against that as well. So I guess Switzerland is my next stop.
Yes, we'll wait for you. We're very welcoming here.
I'll be coming to Villar next week, and then maybe we can go house shopping at the same time. My wife will have a surprise for her then.
Oh my. Shopping in Switzerland is never a good plan. I have to tell you that. It's too expensive.
So house shopping. House
shopping is good, yes. House shopping.
Yeah. Good, David. Take us to the quick fire before we get in trouble.
We always end the episodes, Luca, with a quick fire round. Quick fire round is when I ask you quick answer questions, 30 to 60 seconds each. Are you ready for it?
Ready.
The first question: what areas, technologies, or sectors excite you the most that people around you don't really feel that excited about?
To me, is everything related to waste management. And the reason for that is that people don't get excited about waste in general, right? It's not when you think about waste and you see all the dirt, you don't get excited about it. But while climate change, I think there are opportunities pretty much everywhere in the world, because it's an energy and it's opportunities in the US. There is a big, Inflation Reduction Act now supporting, etc. Europe is probably the only place where we have such an advanced discussion on how to make the circular economy really working in everything from packaging to apparel to all the industries that, let me say, by definition are much more European, like fashion, like food, like maybe a little bit Italian, I would say as well. So yeah, maybe too long of an answer, but that's the area where I'm more excited.
Not at all. Waste management, great one. Second question of the quick fire: what are your top tips for emerging VCs across Europe who are now fundraising for their own funds?
My top tip is, apart from being in touch with you first and also Uplink, I would say resilience. You have to be very resilient in fundraising. I have a lot of respect for people who do that on a normal basis. I don't know how they do it. I'm already very tired, but I think it's also good to find the right investors. So you really get to know people deep in their values, and that's great.
We at EUVC, we also admire very much people who are resilient in their fundraising efforts. And that's why we've dedicated our lives and businesses to support GPs as well. So I'm super, super excited that you said that. Third and final question, Luca. What is the most counterintuitive thing you've learned since you've been in venture?
What's more counterintuitive for me is that a lot of people believe they have a great solution, but they don't think of everything that is already out there very often. So they think they can change pretty much everything from the platform to the infrastructure, etc., even if because of their. So it's a bit self-centric. What we try to think of is more solutions that are fantastic and can change entire industries, but without having to change everything else. And as a result, because they don't require crazy level of investment, are much easier to implement. So in that sense, we're very commercial because we know that how much corporations don't like to put a lot of money on the table for just changing another machine. We tend to work on easy to adopt technologies, even when they're dramatically different. So the respect for what's already out there.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Luca. It was awesome, and thank you for playing along with the the discussion about the future of the planet Earth.
It was a fun and deep conversation at the same time. So I look forward to continuing next week in Villar. Thank you so much for having me, and go Una Terra.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the European VC, the go-to podcast for everything European VC. If you love the show, share it with your friends and join our newsletter at EU.VC.